Many people look at the Wild West through romantic eyes. They think about heroic cowboys riding into sunsets, honorable gunfights at high noon, and rugged individualists conquering the frontier with nothing but grit and a six-shooter. Nothing could be further from the truth. For most people, the Wild West was a brutal, relentless struggle against starvation, disease, and the environment itself. Let's find out now why your chances of surviving 1 month in the real frontier would be worse than your odds of winning the lottery 5 times in a row. Before the story, if these help you sleep, like or subscribe would be cool. Also, drop where you're listening from and the time. I check the comments, and it's crazy seeing people from like Australia and Norway on the same video. Okay, tonight it's the Wild West, but before we go anywhere, get cozy, like actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. So, congratulations. You just woke up in 1875 somewhere on the American frontier. The first thing you notice isn't the singing birds or the fresh air, it's the dirt in your mouth, in your eyes, on your skin, between your teeth because you're lying on a dirt floor. Your back aches something fierce from sleeping on what might generously be called a mattress, basically a canvas sack stuffed with straw that's now home to who knows how many bugs. There's a damp, earthy smell filling your nostrils, not like that pleasant petrichor after rain, more like wet soil mixed with animal dung. Unlike your cozy bed right now, you've spent the night in what settlers called a soddy, a house made literally of dirt. The walls around you are thick chunks of prairie grass cut into bricks, roots and all, stacked like some filthy Lego project. The roof, also sod, laid across wooden poles, and it's leaking in at least 3 places. You sit up and immediately bang your head on a low ceiling beam. A small shower of dirt rains down onto your face, and something that might be a beetle lands in your hair. Welcome to frontier living, where the outdoors is always finding ways to get indoors. Well, ain't you just the picture of sunshine this morning? Comes a voice from the corner where a woman is already stoking a small fire in a cast iron stove. She looks about 40, which means she's probably 25. Life ages you fast out here. Best get your britches on. Them cows ain't gonna milk themselves, and the chickens need feeding before we can even think about breakfast. You look down and realise you're wearing what amounts to a threadbare flannel nightshirt. Not exactly the fringed leather outfit you imagined. Your Hollywood-inspired dreams of the Wild West are already crumbling faster than the ceiling of this sad dirt house. The floor is cold against your bare feet as you stumble to the window. Really just a small square cut in the sod wall with a piece of oiled paper stretched across it. No glass. Actual glass windows were a luxury most settlers couldn't afford. Through the translucent paper, you can make out the faint glow of dawn. It's probably around 4:30 in the morning. The day starts early on the frontier, regardless of how poorly you slept. Don't just stand there gawking, the woman says, handing you a pair of rough canvas pants and a homespun shirt that feels like it was made from the same material as a potato sack. Your pa's already out seeing to the horses. We got a full day ahead. Pa? You have a frontier father now? This is getting weird, but before you can ask questions, the woman, apparently your mother in this strange new reality, is shoving a pair of boots toward you. They're stiff, cracked leather things that have clearly seen better days. And they're about half a size too small. And mind the snakes when you head to the outhouse, she adds casually, as if mentioning there might be rain later. Killed a rattler out there yesterday, but where there's one, there's likely more. Snakes in the outhouse, of course, because using a hole in the ground for a toilet wasn't already unpleasant enough. As you dress, you take stock of the soddy's interior. The entire house is one room, maybe 15 feet square. There's the cast-iron stove, a rough wooden table with 3 mismatched chairs, a small cupboard with a few dishes, and 2 beds, the straw-filled torture device you just rose from, and a slightly larger one where you assume your parents sleep. A few clothes hang from pegs on the wall, and a single shelf holds what appears to be a Bible, an almanac, and a jar containing something unidentifiable. Your mother catches you looking at the jar. "Pickled beets," she says. "Last ones from fall, been saving 'em." Outside, the air is crisp and cool. The soddy sits on a slight rise, giving you a view of the surrounding landscape. It's not the majestic mountains and dramatic canyons of Western movies. Instead, you see a vast, almost featureless prairie stretching to the horizon in every direction. There are a few scraggly trees near what must be a creek about a quarter-mile away, but otherwise it's just grass, sky, and emptiness. Near the soddy is a small barn, also made of sod, a chicken coop constructed of salvaged wood, and the dreaded outhouse, which is basically 4 planks arranged around a hole in the ground with a half door for what passes as privacy. There's a vegetable garden fenced with rough branches to keep animals out, and beyond that, a field where some kind of crop is beginning to grow in neat rows. It's beautiful in a stark, lonely way, and utterly terrifying when you realise how isolated you are from everything familiar. The nearest town could be days away. No hospitals, no grocery stores, no indoor plumbing, no electricity. Just you, your family, and the unforgiving elements. A man emerges from the sod barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He's wearing a broad-brimmed hat that's seen better days, not the fancy Stetson you might have imagined. His face is weathered and tanned, with a beard that seems more a result of not having time to shave than a fashion choice. There's nothing of the dashing cowboy about him. He looks tired, dirty, and much older than he probably is. "Thought you'd sleep the day away," he calls, but there's no real anger in his voice, just resignation and maybe a touch of amusement. Cows are milked. You can start on the chicken feed and water. You nod, not sure what else to do, and head toward the chicken coop. As you walk, your 2 small boots create blisters almost immediately. The chickens regard you with suspicious, beady eyes as you enter their domain. They're scrawny things, nothing like the plump birds you'd see in a grocery store, but they produce eggs, and out here, that's as good as gold. You have no idea what to do, but you notice a bucket of what looks like cornmeal mixed with kitchen scraps near the door. You scatter it around, and the chickens descend on it like tiny, feathered velociraptors. "Not all at once, you dolt," comes your father's voice behind you. "That's got to last 'em the day. Small amounts morning and night. Great. You've been on the frontier for less than an hour and you're already failing at basic survival tasks. Sorry," you mutter, stepping back as he demonstrates the proper amount to feed the chickens. "And get the eggs while you're in there," he adds, walking away to attend to some other chore. Eggs. Right. You spot a few nests built into the wall of the coop, and sure enough, there are eggs inside. You reach for one and immediately get a vicious peck on your hand from an indignant hen who wasn't done with her laying. Ouch. You pull your hand back, now sporting a small but painful wound. The hen glares at you, offended by your intrusion. "You got to check if she's still sittin' first," calls your mother from the doorway of the soddy, shaking her head. "Lord help us, it's like you never collected eggs before, because you haven't, not in this century anyway." Eventually, with guidance shouted from across the yard, you manage to collect 6 eggs without further injury. A miracle, apparently, as your mother seems surprised by the bounty. 6, that's a good morning, she says, taking them from you carefully. "We'll have 2 for breakfast, trade 2 in town next time your pa goes, and save 2 for setting. 6 eggs is considered wealth out here. This puts your modern life into sharp perspective." Breakfast, when it finally happens, is nothing like the hearty frontier meals depicted in films. There's a thin porridge made from cornmeal, cooked until it's a paste-like consistency, a single egg divided among 3 people, and coffee so weak it's basically brown water, but still treated like precious nectar. No sugar, no cream. Those are luxuries saved for special occasions. "We got any bacon?" you ask hopefully, your stomach still growling despite the porridge. Your parents exchange a look that's somewhere between amusement and concern. "Bacon," your father repeats. "In May, we slaughtered the pig in November, smoked what we could. Last of it went in April's stew pot. No bacon until next winter. This is truly a nightmare." After breakfast, your father explains the day's work. There's a field to plough, seeds to plant, wood to chop, water to haul from the creek, and a dozen other tasks that need doing before sundown. The list is overwhelming, especially considering the primitive tools available. No tractors, no power tools, not even proper shovels. Just hand-forged implements that look like museum pieces. "And watch for Indians," he adds casually. "Saw signs of Sioux passing through yesterday, probably just hunting, but keep your eyes open." Right. Add potential conflict with displaced indigenous peoples to your list of concerns. Though history has often distorted these interactions, many encounters were peaceful trades or simply cautious observation from both sides. The tensions created by white settlement on native lands were very real. The work is back-breaking. Within an hour, your hands are blistered, your muscles are screaming, and you're sweating despite the cool morning air. Modern life has not prepared you for this level of physical labor. There are no breaks, no weekends, no vacation days on the frontier, just endless work driven by the simple imperative to survive. Water comes from the creek, carried in heavy wooden buckets that dig into your palms as you walk. It's silty and probably teeming with bacteria, but it's all you have. Your mother boils some for drinking and cooking, but washing is done with unboiled water because fuel is too precious to waste on cleanliness. By midday, you understand why frontier people often look so grim in photographs. Who has the energy to smile when every aspect of survival requires constant grinding labor? Lunch is more cornmeal, this time made into a dense bread and served with a thin soup that has a few unidentifiable vegetables floating in it. Again, you eat everything, suddenly understanding why waste was considered a sin. When each calorie requires hours of work to produce, you don't leave anything on your plate. The afternoon brings new challenges. A wheel on the plough breaks, requiring your father to improvise repairs with materials on hand. A chicken goes missing, likely taken by a fox or hawk. Dark clouds gather on the horizon, promising rain that might be either blessing or curse, depending on how much falls and how quickly. Might be a gully washer coming, your father observes, looking at the sky with concern. Better get the animals in and secure what we can. A severe storm on the open prairie is no joke. With no buildings taller than your soddy for miles around, you're essentially living in a lightning rod, and if the rain is heavy enough, your sod roof could literally melt away, collapsing the whole structure. As you help herd the chickens into their coop and lead the cow into her stall in the sod barn, you realize how precarious existence is out here. There's no calling for help, no emergency services, no infrastructure to fall back on. It's just you, your wits, and whatever resources you've managed to accumulate. The first fat raindrops begin to fall as you dash back to the soddy. Inside, your mother is already placing buckets under the known leaks in the roof. The interior of the house grows dim as the storm clouds block the sun, and she lights a precious candle, another item too valuable to waste, but necessary now. Get the quilt off the bed, she instructs you. Hang it there by the door to keep the draft out. You do as you're told, noticing how the packed earth floor of the soddy is already turning muddy near the doorway where rain is blowing in. The smell of wet earth intensifies, and somewhere in the walls you hear the scurrying of what must be mice or possibly something larger seeking shelter from the storm. The rain hammers down, creating a strange drumming sound on the sod roof. Water begins to drip in new places, and soon there are more leaks than buckets. Your mother seems unperturbed, simply moving the buckets to catch the worst drips and letting the others fall where they may. "Ain't the first time we've been rained on inside our own house," she says with a shrug. "Won't be the last." Your father comes in, soaked to the skin and tracking mud. He removes his dripping hat and coat, hanging them by the stove to dry. "Creek's rising," he reports. "If it keeps up like this, we might have to move to higher ground tonight." The casual way he mentions possibly abandoning your home to floodwaters is chilling. This is just life on the frontier. Constant adaptation to threats that could destroy everything you've worked for. The storm rages for hours, bringing lightning that makes the hair on your arms stand up and thunder that seems to shake the very earth. Through it all, your parents remain calm, going about necessary indoor tasks like mending clothes and repairing tools. Their resilience is both impressive and sobering. Finally, as evening approaches, the storm begins to ease. Your father ventures out to check on the animals and assess the damage. He returns with mixed news. Chicken coop held. Barn's got a partial collapse on the north side, but the cow's fine. Garden's flooded but might drain off if the rain stays away. He removes his hat, releasing a small cascade of water onto the already damp floor. Creek's high but not rising anymore. Think we can stay put tonight. Dinner is a repeat of lunch, cornmeal bread and thin soup, though this time your mother adds a few precious pinches of salt for flavour. The food is bland but filling, and you're surprised by how good it tastes after a day of physical labour. Hunger, it turns out, is the best seasoning. After dinner, there's still work to do. Items dampened by the leaking roof need to be dried. The floor requires raking to help it dry out. Plans must be made for repairing the barn tomorrow. On the frontier, the workday doesn't end when the sun sets. With no electricity, darkness brings a profound change to the household. The single candle provides meagre illumination, barely enough to see faces across the small room. Your mother takes advantage of the light to do some mending, her fingers working by touch, more than sight, as she repairs a tear in your father's shirt. "Read us something?" she asks him, and he nods, reaching for the Bible on the shelf. This, you realise, is entertainment on the frontier. No television, no internet, no books except perhaps a Bible, an almanac, and maybe a few precious volumes brought from back east. Stories, songs, and conversation are the only diversions available after the sun goes down. Your father reads by candlelight, his voice steady as he recites familiar passages. You notice how both he and your mother have the words nearly memorized, nodding along or sometimes speaking in unison at certain verses. This book isn't just religious text to them. It is literature, comfort, and one of their few connections to the wider world. As the reading continues, you find your eyelids growing heavy despite the hard day and the harder one that surely awaits tomorrow. The physical exhaustion of frontier life is catching up to you, and even the prospect of returning to that bug-infested straw mattress isn't enough to keep you awake. Your mother notices your drooping head. "Off to bed with you," she says, not unkindly. "Dawn comes early, and there's twice the work tomorrow with the storm damage." You stumble to your bed, too tired to even remove your clothes beyond kicking off your boots. As you lie down on the rustling straw, you realise something profound. The romanticised Wild West of movies and books is a fantasy. The reality was this: endless work, constant danger, and the most basic struggle for survival. The settlers who tamed the frontier weren't gunslingers or heroes in the conventional sense. They were ordinary people facing extraordinary hardship with stubborn determination. Their heroism wasn't in shootouts at high noon, but in getting up before dawn, day after day, to wrest a living from unforgiving land with inadequate tools and no safety net. As sleep begins to claim you, you hear your parents speaking softly by the dying candle. "Think the wheat will make it?" your mother asks. "Has to," your father replies simply. "We've got nothing else." That's the reality of the Wild West, not adventure and romance, but the constant nagging question of whether you'll have enough food to survive until next season. The stakes weren't fame and glory, they were life and death. You drift off to sleep with a new appreciation for the pioneers who settled the American frontier and profound gratitude that you'll wake up tomorrow in your comfortable 21st century bed with running water, electricity, and no leaking sod roof in sight. Outside the soddy, the vast prairie stretches under a sky now cleared of storms, the stars brilliantly visible in a way they never are in light-polluted modern cities. It's breathtakingly beautiful and completely indifferent to the tiny human struggles happening beneath it. The wind whispers through the grass, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howls. This is the true Wild West. Beautiful, brutal, and utterly unlike the myth. A place where survival itself was victory and where people discovered the outer limits of their own endurance every single day. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you completely is your father banking the fire in the stove, carefully preserving every precious coal for tomorrow's cooking. In that simple act is everything you need to know about frontier life, the constant conservation of resources, the planning for tomorrow, the understanding that waste of any kind could mean the difference between survival and disaster. As the wind whistles through the cracks in the sod walls, you realize that the most dangerous outlaws on the frontier weren't men with guns. They were starvation, disease, weather, and isolation. And the greatest heroes weren't the ones who won shootouts, but those who managed to create some small measure of security and comfort in a land that offered neither. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, repairing storm damage, tending crops, caring for animals, and the 100 other tasks necessary for survival. But for now, there's the blessed relief of sleep, however uncomfortable the bed. On the frontier, even rest is earned through the sweat of the day's labour. And so ends your first day in the real Wild West, not with a gunfight or a heroic last stand, but with the quiet triumph of having survived until sundown. Out here, sometimes that's victory enough. The rooster's crow might as well be a fire alarm for how quickly it jolts you awake. Your eyes open to the same dirt ceiling, the same earthy smell, and the same aching body, now with exciting new sores from yesterday's unaccustomed labour. For a brief, beautiful moment, you think maybe it was all a dream. But no, you're still here in 1875, lying on a straw mattress in a house made of dirt, about to face another day of frontier survival. Your mother is already up, stoking the cookstove fire. The thin grey light filtering through the oiled paper window suggests it's barely dawn. "About time," she says, noting your open eyes. "Got a heap of work before breakfast, and we're running low on just about everything." You sit up, wincing at the stiffness in your muscles. Yesterday's storm has left the soddy's floor damp and muddy in spots. A slug is slowly making its way across one wall, leaving a glistening trail behind it. "Homie." "What do you mean, running low?" you ask, pulling on the same dirty clothes from yesterday. Your mother gives you a look that's part concern, part exasperation. You hit your head in that storm. We're low on flour, salt, coffee, just about everything that ain't cornmeal. Your pa's ride into town today, but he can't carry much back on one horse. The reality of frontier food supply hits you like a brick. There's no Amazon delivery, no grocery store down the street. The nearest town might be a full day's ride away, and you can only bring back what fits in saddlebags or a small wagon, assuming you can afford to buy anything at all. What about breakfast? Your stomach growls, reminding you how little you ate yesterday. Eggs and cornmeal mush again. We save the flour for trade. So much for pancakes or toast. The frontier diet is repetitive by necessity. You eat what you have, not what you want. Outside, the morning is cool and misty. The storm has passed, leaving puddles across the yard and a fresh, clean smell in the air. Your father is already at work, repairing the damaged barn wall, hammering salvaged planks over the collapse. "Fetch water," he calls when he spots you. Creek should be running clear by now. The wooden yoke he hands you is designed to carry 2 buckets at once, one hanging from each end, balanced across your shoulders. It looks simple enough in theory, but the reality is a neck-straining, shoulder-crushing implement of torture. You grab 2 wooden buckets and head toward the creek. The walk is only about a quarter mile, but with the muddy ground pulling at your boots, it feels much longer. When you reach the creek, you see that your father was optimistic. The water is still brown and swollen from yesterday's rain. Standing on the slippery bank, you dip 1 bucket into the current. The force of the water nearly pulls it from your grasp, and you almost go tumbling in after it. Heart pounding, you manage to fill both buckets, though water sloshes over the sides as you try to lift them. The yoke balances awkwardly across your shoulders, the full weight of the water making your knees buckle. How did people do this every day? By the time you make it halfway back to the soddy, your shoulders are screaming and water has sloshed out with every step, soaking your pants and boots. Your mother meets you at the door, taking one look at your struggle and sighing. "Put it down before you drop it. We'll need more than that, but rest a minute first." Inside, she explains the water situation. "We need drinking water, cooking water, washing water, and water for the animals. Creek water's fine for most, but drinking and cooking needs to be settled and boiled." She shows you how to put a bit of alum in the water to help settle the silt, then strain it through a cloth. The resulting liquid is clearer, but still has a brownish tint that would send modern health departments into conniptions. "We'll boil this batch for drinking," she says, pouring some into a large kettle on the stove. "Rest is for washing up and the garden." You make 3 more trips to the creek, each one a test of endurance. By the final journey, your shoulders are rubbed raw from the yoke, and your arms feel like they might detach from your body. The idea of turning a tap for instant water has never seemed more miraculous. Back at the soddy, your mother has breakfast ready, the promised cornmeal mush with a single egg stirred in and a cup of coffee so weak it's basically hot brown water. Still, after the water-hauling ordeal, it tastes like a feast. "Your pa's headed to town," she says as you eat. "We need to get food put by while he's gone. Storm's damaged more than we thought." "Put by?" you ask. "Stored. Preserved. Ain't you never listened to a word I said growing up?" She shakes her head. "Storm knocked down half the garden fence. Rabbits got in and had themselves a feast on the young greens. We need to salvage what's left and find what we can to supplement." After breakfast, she leads you to what remains of the garden. Sure enough, the crude fence of branches and twine has collapsed on one side, and many of the tender seedlings have been nibbled to nubs. "Rabbits got the lettuce and most of the peas," she says, surveying the damage, "but the potatoes are still good underground, and they didn't care for the onions, thank the Lord." She hands you a rough basket. "Dig up what onions look ready and gather any dandelion greens you see. We'll make do." Foraging, you quickly learn, is a critical frontier skill. Your mother points out edible plants you'd have walked right past. Wild onions, dandelion greens, something called lamb's quarters, and even some early berries growing in a sunny patch. Nothing is wasted, and everything edible is collected with the same care you might give to gold nuggets. Folks starve with food growing all around them, she explains, expertly identifying plants. Indians taught the first settlers what to eat, but most folks nowadays have forgotten. Your grandma showed me, and I'm showing you. The foraging expedition takes you to the edge of your property, where a small stand of trees grows near the creek. Here, your mother spots mushrooms growing on a fallen log. These are safe, she says, picking whitish fungi from the rotting wood. Those over there'll kill you dead in hours. You got to know the difference. You make a mental note to never ever eat wild mushrooms without an expert guide. Frontier medicine isn't equipped to handle poisonings. Back at the soddy, you watch as your mother takes inventory of the food stores. It's a sobering sight. A small barrel half full of cornmeal, a cloth sack with maybe 5 pounds of flour, a jar of molasses that's mostly empty, a small wooden box of salt, a few strings of dried vegetables hanging from the rafters, some mysterious dried meat in a cloth sack, and that's about it. We'll need to make a stew with what we gathered, she decides, and I'll start a batch of sourdough. Flour's low, but we've still got the starter. She shows you a small crock kept near the stove, containing a bubbling, sour-smelling mixture. This, you learn, is sourdough starter, a living culture of wild yeast and bacteria that leavens bread without the need for commercial yeast. It's one of the frontier's most valuable possessions, often brought from back east and maintained for generations. Your great-grandma brought this starter over the Oregon Trail, she says with reverence. Been keeping it alive near 30 years now. The idea that your fictional frontier family has maintained the same living organism for decades, feeding it regularly with precious flour and water, carefully preserving it through moves and disasters, speaks volumes about frontier priorities. While your mother works with the sourdough, you're sent to check traps your father apparently set before leaving for town. This involves walking the perimeter of the property and checking small wire contraptions hidden in the grass. The first 2 traps are empty, but the third contains a rabbit, now very dead and very real. This isn't a cute cartoon bunny or a pet store rabbit. It's a wild animal caught for food, and someone needs to deal with it. That someone, unfortunately, appears to be you. You carry the trap back to the soddy, trying not to look directly at the lifeless creature inside. Your mother takes one look at your face and almost smiles. Never cleaned a rabbit before? She asks, already knowing the answer. Well, today's your day to learn. What follows is a graphic lesson in frontier food preparation that would horrify most modern sensibilities. The rabbit is strung up, skinned, gutted, and prepared for cooking with brisk efficiency. Your mother wastes nothing. Even the organs are set aside for specific uses, and the fur is carefully preserved for later tanning. Blood makes good fertilizer for the garden, she explains, catching the drips in a bowl, and the bones will go in the stock pot. Can't waste a thing out here. By midday, a pot of what your mother calls prairie stew is simmering on the stove. It contains the rabbit, wild onions, dandelion greens, a few precious potatoes, and the foraged mushrooms, all swimming in a broth made from water and a pinch of salt. The smell is surprisingly appetizing, especially given the graphic preparation you witnessed. Your stomach growls in anticipation. Won't be ready for hours, your mother warns. Good stew needs time. Meanwhile, we got preserving to do. She brings out a wooden bucket you haven't seen before, extracting several fish, apparently caught by your father before he left for town. These too need cleaning and preserving. We'll smoke some and salt the rest, she decides. Smokehouse needs repair after the storm, so we'll have to use the chimney. The next few hours are devoted to food preservation, one of the most critical skills for frontier survival. Without refrigeration, keeping food from spoiling is a constant challenge requiring multiple techniques. You help hang thin strips of fish on strings near the chimney, where smoke from the cook stove will help preserve them. Other pieces are packed in precious salt and stored in a crockery jar. The rabbit skin is stretched on a frame to dry, and even the rabbit's feet are saved. Good luck, your mother explains, though you suspect they have a more practical use she's not mentioning. In fall, we'll do this with everything we can get, she explains. Smoke meat, dry fruit, pickle vegetables, whatever gets us through winter. The concept of winter food storage takes on new meaning when you realize there are no grocery stores to fall back on. Either you preserve enough food during the abundant seasons, or you starve when the snow flies. By mid-afternoon, your mother judges the stew ready. She ladles generous portions into wooden bowls, adding a piece of sourdough bread on the side. The bread isn't what you'd recognize from a modern bakery. It's dense, slightly grey from the unrefined flour, and has a distinctly sour smell. But after a morning of hard work, it's irresistible. The stew is surprisingly good, rich and flavorful despite the simple ingredients. The rabbit tastes nothing like chicken, despite the modern cliché having a stronger, gamier flavor that takes some getting used to. But it's protein, and out here, that's what matters. Save room, your mother advises as you reach for a second helping. Food needs to last, and we don't know when your pa will be back with supplies. This constant calculation, how much to eat now versus how much to save for later, is yet another aspect of frontier life that never makes it into the romanticized tales. Every meal is a strategic decision balancing immediate hunger against future need. After the meal, your mother carefully stores the leftover stew in a covered pot. Without refrigeration, it won't last long, especially as the day warms up. Tomorrow's breakfast, you realize, will likely be reheated stew if it hasn't spoiled overnight. We need to check the root cellar, she says next. Storm might have flooded it. The root cellar turns out to be a small, dark hole dug into the ground behind the soddy, reinforced with scavenged wood and covered with a slanted door. It's the frontier equivalent of a refrigerator, a naturally cool space where food can be stored longer than it would last in the warm soddy. When your mother pulls open the door, your hearts sink. Several inches of muddy water cover the floor of the cellar, and the few potatoes and preserved goods stored there are partially submerged. Damn it all, she mutters, forgetting propriety in the face of disaster. This is bad, real bad. Together, you bail out the water using a bucket and assess the damage. Some potatoes might be salvageable if used immediately. A jar of preserved tomatoes is intact, its wax seal unbroken, but several other jars have cracked or lost their seals, their contents now unsafe to eat. We just lost half our emergency stores, your mother says grimly. Better hope your pa has luck in town, or it's going to be lean times ahead. The loss of food to spoilage, flooding, or pests was a constant threat on the frontier. A single disaster could wipe out months of careful preservation and storage, leaving a family vulnerable to hunger or even starvation. As you help clean up the root cellar, you notice your mother setting aside some of the questionable food items rather than discarding them. Can we still eat those? You ask, pointing to some potatoes with soft spots. We'll cut around the rot, she explains. And these ones with sprouts, we'll plant them instead of eating them. Sometimes you have to sacrifice today's meal for next season's crop. This long-term thinking defined frontier survival. Every decision balances immediate needs against future security, and waste is the enemy. Even items that seem spoiled to modern eyes might have salvageable parts or secondary uses. By late afternoon, your father returns from town, his horse loaded with small but precious supplies. The haul is meagre by modern standards. A small sack of flour, a tiny bag of sugar, some coffee beans, a few packets of seeds to replace what was lost in the garden, and a newspaper that's already 2 weeks old. Prices are up again, he reports grimly. Flour's nearly double what it was last fall. Could only get £5 for what we had to trade. The economics of frontier life were brutal. Without cash, most transactions were based on barter, trading eggs, butter, or homemade items for store-bought necessities. The values fluctuated wildly based on scarcity, and distant events like wars or railroad strikes could cause local prices to skyrocket. "Any news?" your mother asks, carefully storing the new supplies. Sioux are restless up north. Railroads hiring for track work south of here, and the Morgans lost their oldest boy to fever. He delivers these items: potential war, job opportunities, and a neighbour's death, in the same matter-of-fact tone, each just another fact of frontier life. The newspaper is treated as a valuable resource, not just for news, but for practical use. After your father reads it aloud during supper, another serving of the rabbit stew, now with fresh sourdough bread, the paper will be used for everything from wrapping food to serving as toilet paper in the outhouse. Nothing is wasted. Supper conversation centers around food supplies and planning. Your father reports that the general store was low on almost everything, with a supply wagon not expected for another 2 weeks. This means stretching your existing food even further. "We'll set more traps," he decides, "and tomorrow we'll take the wagon to the creek. Might be catfish after that rain." The constant focus on securing food is striking. Unlike in modern life, where food acquisition might take up a couple of hours a week at a grocery store, frontier families spent the majority of their time producing, gathering, preserving, and preparing food. It was their primary occupation, superseding almost everything else. After supper, you help clean up, learning yet another frontier food lesson. Nothing edible is thrown away. The few spoons of leftover stew are carefully stored. The sourdough starter is fed with a small amount of precious flour and water. Even the washing water from the bowls is saved to water the recovering garden plants. As darkness falls, your father reads from the newspaper by candlelight, sharing news of the wider world. There's talk of politics in Washington, Indian wars on the plains, and railroad expansion. It's strange to hear these historical events discussed as current news, with no idea how they'll ultimately resolve. The day's work has left you exhausted, and you find yourself nodding off despite the early hour. The physical demands of frontier life, hauling water, gardening, preserving food, have drained your energy completely. The idea of staying up late is ludicrous when dawn will bring another day of labour. Before retiring to your straw mattress, you take a moment to reflect on what you've learned. Food on the frontier isn't just sustenance, it's security, currency, and constant concern. The precariousness of the food supply shaped every aspect of daily life, from work schedules to social interactions. The pioneers weren't just surviving day to day, they were constantly planning seasons ahead, balancing immediate needs against future security. As you drift off to sleep, your muscles aching from unaccustomed labour and your stomach surprisingly full despite the limited fare, you realise that the Hollywood depictions of frontier life rarely show this aspect of Western settlement. The daily, unglamorous work of food production doesn't make for exciting cinema, but it was the true test of frontier character, the persistence to plant, harvest, hunt, and preserve day after day, season after season, with no guarantee of success. Your mother's voice drifts from across the soddy where she sits mending by candlelight. Weather holds, we'll pick wild strawberries tomorrow, make a preserve if we find enough. Even at day's end, her mind is on food acquisition and preservation. This constant vigilance, this perpetual awareness of hunger as a lurking threat, defined frontier existence in ways modern people can hardly imagine. Outside, a coyote howls in the distance. Inside the soddy, the fire in the cookstove burns low, carefully banked to preserve coals for morning. On your straw mattress, uncomfortably aware of the rustling that suggests you're not alone in the bedding, you close your eyes and try not to think about tomorrow's work. This is the real Wild West, not shootouts and stagecoach robberies, but the quiet heroism of people who wrested food from unforgiving land and survived through ingenuity, knowledge, and sheer determination. Their daily victories weren't marked with notches on six-shooters, but with full storerooms, preserved harvests, and families that made it through another winter. Sleep comes quickly, your body surrendering to exhaustion. The last thing you hear is your mother softly humming a tune as she works, a gentle reminder that even in this harsh existence, there's still room for small moments of peace. Then darkness takes you, and the frontier day ends as it began, with the promise of more work tomorrow, more challenges to face, and the ever-present question of where the next meal will come from. Morning comes with the crowing rooster and aching limbs. You've survived 2 days on the frontier, which feels like something of an achievement given the challenges. Your family's sod house is still standing, you've learned the basics of water collection and food preparation, and you haven't been bitten by anything too dangerous. Yet. Today brings a new reality check about frontier life, the economics of survival. Back in the 21st century, most people work to pay for their wants after their basic needs are covered. Out here in 1875, you work simply to exist. Got a letter from your uncle, your father says over a breakfast of reheated stew. The concept of leftover stew for breakfast would have horrified you in your previous life, but now you're just grateful for the protein. Says the mine's hiring, good wages, $3 a day. Your mother looks up sharply. $3? In cash money? That's what he writes. Your father taps the worn paper. Says they need men who can handle themselves underground. Dangerous work, but steady pay. You nearly choke on your stew. $3 a day sounds like nothing in modern terms, but the way your parents are discussing it, this is serious money. The prospect clearly excites and worries them in equal measure. How long would you be gone? Your mother asks, her face carefully neutral. Through harvest, at least. Maybe into winter. He doesn't meet her eyes. Would mean leaving you two to handle things here? The implications sink in. Your father would be away for months, leaving just you and your mother to maintain the homestead. All the heavy labour, all the protection duties, all the decisions would fall on fewer shoulders, but the promise of actual cash is clearly tempting. How far to the mine, you ask? 3 days' ride west, near the mountains. He folds the letter carefully. Would need to leave end of the week if I'm going. After breakfast, your father takes you outside to check the animal traps and explain more about frontier economics. The harsh reality quickly becomes clear. Most settlers live in a state of constant debt and barter, with actual cash being rare and precious. General Store runs a tab for most folks, he explains as you walk the property boundary. You get what you need, flour, sugar, tools, and pay with what you produce. Eggs, butter, crops come harvest. Problem is, the prices never quite balance out. He stops to reset an empty trap, his weathered hands working the wire mechanism with practiced ease. Store owner sets the prices on both sides, what you buy and what you trade, and somehow you always end up owing more than you bring in. There's no bitterness in his voice, just resignation. Been that way since we got here, 3 years now, and the debt just grows. The trap sets. You continue walking. A rabbit bounds away at your approach, too quick for any hope of catching it. That mine job? You let the question hang. Cash means freedom, he says simply. Cash means paying down the store debt, maybe buying lumber for a proper house before winter. Cash means not wondering if the store owner will cut us off when the debt gets too high. The concept of being cut off sends a chill through you. In a place with no social safety net, no food banks, no government assistance, being denied credit at the general store could be a death sentence if your own food production failed. At midday, a neighbour arrives, the first visitor you've seen since arriving in this strange frontier reality. He rides up on a horse that's seen better days, leading a second animal pulling a small cart. The man himself is thin to the point of gauntness, with a beard streaked with grey, and clothes that have been patched so many times they're more repair than original fabric. "Afternoon, Thomas," your father greets him. "What brings you out this way?" "Trade day," the man, Thomas, replies, climbing stiffly down from his horse. "Sarah's got some butter she thought your missus might want, and heard you might have eggs to spare." This, you realise, is frontier commerce in action. No stores, no cash, just neighbours trading surplus goods to fill each other's needs. Your mother emerges from the soddy, wiping her hands on her apron, and the two women immediately fall into negotiations about butter and eggs while the men talk crops and weather. The bargaining is subtle but intense. Each egg, each pound of butter has real value when you consider the labour that went into producing it. There's no fixed exchange rate, just a mutual understanding of relative worth influenced by need, quality, and relationship. 3 eggs for half a pound of butter seems fair, your mother eventually decides. The trade is made with both women seemingly satisfied with the deal. Thomas has other news to share as well. Railroads hiring 10 miles south, building a spur line to the new cattle yards, $2 a day, they say. Another job opportunity, another potential source of that precious cash. Your father nods thoughtfully but doesn't commit either way. After Thomas leaves, your parents have a quiet, intense discussion about the various work options. The mine pays better, but is more dangerous and further away. The railroad is closer, but offers less money. Staying on the homestead means continuing to scrape by on barter and credit, but keeps the family together and the claim secure. What happens if we leave the homestead unworked, you ask, genuinely curious about frontier property rights. Your father looks grim. Claim jumpers. Government too. Homestead Act says we need to improve the land for 5 years to get title. Leave it too long, someone reports it abandoned, we lose everything. The precariousness of frontier property ownership is yet another reality check. Without regular presence and work, a family could lose their entire investment of time and labour. The land itself has no value without the improvements, the cleared fields, the buildings, the fences that represent years of back-breaking work. In the afternoon, your father takes you to check the crops, what's left of them after the storm damage. Walking through the fields, he explains the economics of frontier farming in terms that would make a modern accountant weep. Put in 5 bushels of seed wheat this spring, he says, looking over the green shoots just beginning to grow. If weather holds and locusts stay away, might get 30 bushels at harvest. Keep 5 for next year's seed, use 10 for our own flour, sell the rest to the mill for maybe 50 cents a bushel. You do the quick math. 15 bushels at 50 cents each would yield $7.50 for an entire season's work, less than 3 days' wages at the mine your uncle mentioned. Why farm at all, you ask? Why not just work for wages? Your father gives you a look that suggests this is a question only a fool or someone raised with no understanding of frontier realities would ask. Wages can stop, company can fold, mine can collapse. He gestures at the field. Land feeds you no matter what, long as you work it right. Might not make you rich, but you won't starve if the jobs dry up. This fundamental reality, that self-sufficiency was the only true security, shaped the mindset of frontier settlers. Cash work was a supplement to, not a replacement for, the subsistence farming that kept them alive. As the afternoon wears on, another visitor arrives. This one less welcome. A man in a dusty black coat rides up, his horse better fed than Thomas's was. Without dismounting, he hands your father a folded paper. Tax assessment, he announces, due by end of summer. County's building a new courthouse. After he rides away, your father unfolds the paper and his face darkens. $2.40, he mutters. Where the hell are we supposed to get that? The tax bill, a paltry sum by modern standards, represents another economic pressure on the frontier family. With little cash income, even small government levies could be devastating, and unlike modern times, tax collection on the frontier could be brutally direct. Fail to pay, and you might lose your livestock, tools, or even your land. Could sell the cow, your mother suggests without enthusiasm, having joined the conversation. Your father shakes his head. Without milk and butter, we'd just end up deeper in debt at the store. Might have to take that mine job after all. By evening, the economic reality of frontier life has become painfully clear. Your family is caught in multiple binds, needing cash for taxes and store debt, but reliant on subsistence farming for basic survival, wanting to improve their situation with a proper house, but unable to afford lumber without wage work that would take your father away from the homestead. Theoretically owning their land through the Homestead Act, but constantly at risk of losing it if they can't meet payment or improvement requirements. The romantic notion of pioneers as independent settlers beholden to no one has evaporated completely. The reality is a complex web of debts, obligations, and vulnerable legal claims that keep frontier families in a state of perpetual economic insecurity. Supper is simple. More sourdough bread, the last of the stew, and some dandelion greens your mother collected. The food reflects the economic reality. Eat what you can produce or forage. Save what little money you have for absolute necessities that can't be made at home. After the meal, your father takes out a slate and pencil, paper being too precious to waste on calculations, and begins working through the family's economic situation. The figures are sobering. Store debt of nearly $15, property tax of $2.40, seed for next season, essential supplies for winter. The total needed far exceeds any realistic projection of what the farm might produce in tradable surplus. The mine it is, he finally decides. I'll leave Saturday. Should be able to work 4 months before the snow gets too deep for travel. Might clear $40, $50 if I'm careful. Your mother nods, her face revealing little of what must be a storm of emotions at the prospect of her husband leaving for a third of the year. I'll start getting your things ready. This pattern, men leaving for wage work while women maintained the homestead, was common on the frontier. It created a strange dual economy, with men engaged in cash labour while women managed the subsistence production that kept families alive. Both were essential, but the work was sharply divided along gender lines. The next morning brings a new type of frontier work experience. A neighbour arrives, a broad-shouldered man named Miller, with news that his barn raising is scheduled for the following week. Could use every hand available, he tells your father. Got the Johnsons and the Petersons committed already. Thought your boy here might help too. He nods in your direction. Barn raisings were one of the few examples of communal labour on the otherwise individualistic frontier. Neighbours would gather to help construct a building that would be impossible for a single family to manage alone. The work wasn't paid in cash, but operated on a principle of reciprocity. You help your neighbours, and they help you when your turn comes. We'll be there, your father promises. Might be the last big job I do before heading to the mines. Miller's expression shifts slightly at the mention of the mines. Heard they had a collapse last month. 3 men didn't come out. Your father nods grimly. Heard the same, but they're paying cash, and the taxman won't take eggs or wheat. After Miller leaves, you help with the day's chores, now familiar enough with the routine to work without constant direction, hauling water, feeding animals, checking traps, weeding what remains of the garden. The labour never ends, but at least you're developing calluses to replace the blisters on your hands. As you work, your father explains more about frontier economics. Land's the only real wealth out here, he says, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. Get enough acres under cultivation. Eventually you can hire labour instead of doing it all yourself. That's the dream. Becoming a landowner instead of just a worker. But that dream, you realise, was only attainable for a lucky few. Most settlers remained caught in the cycle of subsistence and debt, working their small claims and supplementing with wage labour when necessary. The Jeffersonian ideal of a nation of independent yeoman farmers collided with the harsh economic realities of frontier capitalism. By midday, another visitor arrives. This one, unexpected and unwelcome. A man in a suit far too fine for frontier conditions rides up on a horse that's clearly well-fed and groomed. Without greeting, he surveys your family's modest homestead with obvious disdain. "Reynolds!" Your father acknowledges him coldly. "What brings the bank all the way out here?" The man, Reynolds, produces a leather folder and extracts a document. "Just making my rounds, Mason, reminding folks of their obligations." He hands the paper to your father. "Bank's called in the notes on several properties in the county. Thought you should know yours might be next." After he rides away, your father crumples the paper in his fist, his knuckles white with anger. "Vultures," he mutters, "just waiting for folks to fail." This, too, was part of frontier economics, the constant pressure from banks and speculators eager to acquire land from struggling homesteaders. The homestead itself, with all the improvements made through years of labour, was valuable enough to attract predatory attention from those with capital, but without the willingness to do the physical work of settlement. What happens if they call in the note, you ask, not entirely understanding the frontier banking terminology. Your father sighs, means they demand immediate payment of the full amount borrowed, not just the regular instalments, and since nobody out here has that kind of cash sitting around, they get to seize the property. He looks around at the modest homestead, his expression a mix of pride and worry. Everything we've built, everything we've worked for, gone. The reality of frontier financing is another shock. Many settlers took loans to establish their homesteads for seed, tools, livestock, or supplies, with the property itself as collateral. Unlike modern mortgages with fixed terms and regulated practices, frontier loans could be called in at the bank's discretion, often when the land had increased in value due to the settlers' improvements or when railroad development made the location more desirable. "How much do we owe?" you ask. $50. The sum clearly pains him to say aloud. Borrowed when we first claimed the land, been paying interest for 3 years, but never able to touch the principal amount. $50, a sum a modern person might spend on dinner without thought, represented an almost insurmountable debt for a frontier family. With annual cash income measured in single digits, paying off such a loan would take years under the best circumstances. The mine job, you begin, might save us if I can work the full season and if they pay what they promise. He doesn't sound optimistic, but plenty of men go to the mines with dreams of clearing their debts and come back with nothing, if they come back at all. The afternoon brings yet another dimension of frontier economics, the peddler. A wagon arrives, driven by a cheerful man with an improbable moustache and a hat that's seen better days. The sides of his wagon fold down to reveal shelves of goods, fabrics, tools, medicine, seeds, and various trinkets. Yes. Unlike the general store in town, the peddler deals primarily in cash, though he's willing to consider certain items in trade, particularly eggs, butter, and handcrafted goods that can be sold elsewhere. His prices are higher than the stores, but he brings goods directly to isolated homesteads, saving families the time and expense of a town journey. Your mother approaches the wagon with clear interest but equal caution. Got any needles? Mine's nearly worn through. The peddler produces a paper of needles. Finest Sheffield steel, 20 cents for the lot. Highway robbery, your mother mutters, but her tone lacks conviction. Good needles are essential for the constant mending that keeps frontier clothing functional. After careful consideration of the family's meagre resources, she trades 2 eggs and one of her hand-knitted dishcloths for a single needle, a small cake of soap, and a packet of sugar candy. This last item clearly intended as a special treat for you, though you've done nothing to deserve such luxury. The peddler, his business concluded, offers news along with his goods. Railroads pushing west faster than expected. Land prices are jumping ahead of the line. Might be worth holding on to your claim a while longer, even with the bank making noises. This information, more valuable than any physical goods he carries, causes your father to reconsider his plans. If land values are rising, perhaps taking on additional debt to hold the homestead might be worthwhile, despite the risk. As evening approaches, your family gathers for a council on their economic future. The options are limited and all involve significant trade-offs. Your father could take the mine job, earning cash but leaving the homestead vulnerable. He could seek work on the railroad, earning less but staying closer to home. They could sell assets, the cow, a horse, tools, to pay immediate debts but cripple their productive capacity, or they could try to secure additional credit to weather the current crisis, deepening their long-term debt but preserving their claim. What would you do? Your father asks you directly, surprising you with the invitation to weigh in on such an important decision. The question feels impossibly heavy. Each option has potentially life-altering consequences for this frontier family. Even with your advanced knowledge from the future, you can't predict which path would ultimately prove best in this uncertain environment. You hesitate, acutely aware of your ignorance of frontier realities despite the crash course of the last few days. I'd take the mine job. Cash seems to be what we need most right now. Your father nods slowly. That's my thinking too. Not what I'd choose if there was a better option, but there isn't. He turns to your mother. Can you and the boy manage here? She straightens her shoulders. We'll manage. Always have. The decision made, the evening turns to preparation. Your father will leave for the mines in 3 days after helping with the neighbour's barn raising. Plans are laid for his absence. What crops need tending, which repairs can't wait, how to handle potential emergencies. The conversation is practical, focused on survival, with little room for sentiment despite the months of separation ahead. As darkness falls and the single candle is lit, you find yourself reflecting on what you've learned about frontier economics. The popular image of self-sufficient pioneers carving independent lives from the wilderness has given way to a more complex reality. Homesteaders caught in webs of debt and obligation, their independence constrained by banks, taxes, and the fundamental need to participate in larger economic systems for survival. The true heroes of Western settlement weren't lone individuals conquering the wilderness, but families making impossible choices and sacrifices in pursuit of long-term security. Their struggles weren't primarily against Indians or outlaws, but against economic forces largely beyond their control. Weather that destroyed crops, banks that called in loans, companies that paid less than promised or folded entirely. As you prepare for sleep on your now familiar straw mattress, you find yourself grateful for the economic safety nets of modern life: unemployment insurance, consumer protection laws, regulated banking that most people take for granted. The frontier's economic reality was a constant high-wire act with no safety net, where a single setback could mean ruin. Outside, night creatures call in the darkness. Inside the soddy, your parents speak softly about their plans and hopes, their voices barely audible across the small room. This too is the real Wild West, not the glamour of gunfights or the freedom of the open range, but ordinary people making difficult decisions in a system that offered few good options and no guarantees. Sleep comes more easily now that your body is adapting to the physical demands of frontier life. Your last thoughts before drifting off are of the mine your father will soon enter, dark, dangerous, and promising either salvation or disaster for this family hanging by an economic thread. The day of the barn raising dawns bright and clear. You wake before the rooster crows, your body now somehow anticipating the early frontier schedule. The straw mattress still rustles with unwelcome residents, but you've almost gotten used to sharing your bed with insects. Almost. The barn raising is a community event bringing together scattered homesteaders from miles around. By mid-morning, wagons and riders begin arriving at the Miller property, a homestead slightly larger and more established than your family's, with a proper wooden house instead of a soddy. Men arrive ready for work, women bearing food for the communal meal that will follow, and children excited for the rare opportunity to play with others their age. You note how even in frontier isolation, humans seek community and connection. The Miller family has prepared for weeks, cutting and preparing lumber, digging post holes, gathering necessary tools. Now, with the help of neighbors, they'll accomplish in a single day what would take months for one family alone. Your father introduces you around as the work groups form. The men size you up with quick glances, assessing your potential contribution. You're